Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gail Carson. Welcome to Living Regret Free, a program that shows you how to live a better and more joyful life. As an added bonus, I invite you to listen to an introduction to my Mindset Matters program, which ties into this so well. Go to www.sobmindset.com. It's free, and I know you will enjoy it. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at gailcarson13@gmail.com or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter.
My guest today is Adele Spraggon. She is an award-winning author as well as an international speaker and trainer. As a behavioral change expert, she explores topics that illustrate the potential of the human brain and its ability to make optimal choices that reduce conflict and achieve goals in all areas of life. It's all in your head, she says, and that's a good thing because with the right brain pattern, most any problem can be overcome. And her key focus is improving leadership and innovation through transformation decision making. Welcome, Adele.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I know you wrote a book called Shift, 4 Steps to Personal Empowerment. Now, we have heard a lot about empowerment over the last many years. What are your 4 steps and how do they change a person?
Yeah, so, behavioral change, I feel, has changed dramatically how we teach it over the last few decades. And the reason for that is because neuroscience has now done an explosion of research into how our brain is actually working and how our brain is actually thinking. And so when we think about behavioral change, it used to be that we would learn how to think positive, for example, Gail, right? Or what else would we used to do? Think positive, change your mindset, set your commitments, set your goals, all of that stuff. But frankly, neuroscience is now showing us something very, very interesting. And that is that the unconscious parts of our brain are actually in charge of our decision making. So our unconscious is actually firing before we become consciously aware that we are going to make a particular choice. And this changes everything about how we are going to approach personal empowerment and behavioral change. And so my 4 steps are we have to work with the brain patterning rather than working with commitments and goal setting. And when we understand how the brain is patterning and how those brain patterns are actually choosing our actions for us, then we have an opportunity to change those patterns. Is this making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's a lot of new research and new technology regarding the brain as well. So we're always, I think, discovering something about how the brain works.
Yes, yes. And, like here's one example, and this is Sam Harris has a beautiful way of putting this. He says, if we could hook our brain up to a brain scanner and notice what was happening, the choices that we're making. So let's say, for example, you're sitting in a doctor's office and you are going to pick up a magazine and read it. And that choice you are making at 2 hours, 32 minutes, and 3 seconds. But your brain is lighting up at 2 hours and 30 minutes and 1 second, right? So the brain is actually coming in before, and a brain scanner knows exactly what magazine you're going to pick up, even before you know it, knows exactly where you're going to get bored and put that magazine down, knows when you're going to have the next cup of coffee, right? And all of that is occurring at a level of the subconscious. And so it's time that we start working with how our brain is actually functioning. And when we do that, making right choices, making better decisions, and actually acting on those decisions becomes so much easier than how we are constantly working against ourselves, right? Because that's where all of that procrastination and avoiding comes in.
Yeah, you talk about procrastination. You talk about people avoiding, I think, probably choices and so forth and quitting. And I know in some of the science shows that I have watched on TV, it shows how when even certain things are shown, whether it's light or whether it's someone walking into a room or whether it's the words that are said, how the brain waves change. So how does someone train the brain to do what you suggest that it does?
Yeah, great question. So what we have to do is we've actually been concentrating on the wrong thing. So let me give your listener an example here. So most people are taught this: set a goal and then determine the steps that you need to take to get to that goal. But that's the wrong way of approaching a goal. So here's a better way. Set a goal. Now the next question is not how do I get there, but why do I not have that goal today? Now, as everybody asks themselves that question, they will start to notice that a whole bunch of behaviors, beliefs, and actions start bubbling up to the surface that they may not have been aware of before. So, for example, let's say that they set a goal of what's something that one of your listeners might be wanting to do, Gail? Let's use an example that might fit your listener.
Well, let's say, since this is a living regret-free show, let's talk about, since I'm all about this, how to feel happier in your day.
Perfect. So the goal is I want to feel happier as I go about my day-to-day living, right? Okay, great.
Right.
So the next question that your listener wants to ask is, why am I not happy right now? Now, they'll notice as soon as they ask that question that, the mind starts saying, well, I'm bored. I don't like what I'm doing, for example, right? Or I have all of these regrets from my past, and those keep interfering in my thinking patterns as I go about my day. Or, I'm really worried about the future. Perfect. All of that is the brain patterning. All of that is actually how the brain is patterned. And let's back up a minute, right? Because these patterns are created when we were very little, most of them before we even were aware that we were creating them, okay? So all of this stuff is now bubbling up to the surface, and that's where we go to work. If we can remove those brain patterns, or let me put it simpler, if we can just tease that neural pathway apart, right? Then the brain has what is called plasticity. It is constantly rewiring itself. And what will happen when we remove that pattern is the brain will snap into a different channel. Now, at that point, the direction that you're trying to go in, which is happiness, the brain will automatically take you in that direction. And it will do for you all of those things that you're trying to accomplish, such as feel positive or create. It will come up with creative ideas where you will no longer be bored about what you're doing. All of that worry about the future will disappear. So as long as we know how the brain is working and how to work with it, we've got a much better chance of achieving happiness than constantly striving for something we don't feel we have.
But isn't that difficult to do, Adele? I mean, a person does not know how to do that on their own. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. So we're not trained in working with the brain. Most of our behavioral change today, like I was saying initially, we're trained in the wrong way. And that's simply because nobody before now knew how the brain was working. Okay, so we've been educated to think that we have free will. We've been educated to think that we should consciously know where we want to go and be able to achieve it. But frankly, now neuroscience is showing us that's just not true. That's just not the way the brain works. Perfect. So no, at this point in time, Gail, nobody really knows how to work with the brain, but simply because nobody's taught us how. Okay. Now we can get to my 4-step process like you were asking at the beginning. How do we actually do this, right? How do we actually change that patterning? So the first thing to
Is that something that people can learn by reading your book?
Yes, they can. So all 4 steps are outlined in the book. And I suggest that everybody takes it one step at a time. What I mean by that is they read one step and apply it to their patterns for a week, and then take the next step and apply that one to their patterns for a week. So do it over a 5-week process, okay? It's 4 steps. There's an additional step in there which I won't explain here, but it is a 5-week process. At the end of that 5 weeks, they will start to see remarkable shifts in their life. Okay.
Wow.
So if
Okay.
happiness is what they're trying to achieve, the book will show you exactly what I just said. Set a goal, understand what's between you and that goal, and then you can start to identify what is my pattern here, which is preventing me from being happy right now. And let me just identify what a pattern is for your readers. So a pattern, or for your listener, a pattern is an intertwined physical sensation, emotion, and thought. When the three aspects of our being come together, they show us, they demonstrate that we have a neural pathway in the brain that is feeling, thinking, and physically feeling in that way, emotionally feeling that way. Okay, and then that's where we can go to work. So that's first step, is just identify what's happening in me. So, I'm striving towards happiness. I'm not happy. I'm worried about the future. Perfect. So now your listener can say, okay, I feel this worry, and I feel it here in my stomach. I can feel my stomach doing a little flipping or tightening. And my thought is, oh my gosh, my future is not going to be good. Perfect. If we can see that as a pattern and stop thinking that that's something we need to fix, now we can actually go to work on how to remove that pattern rather than correct our future.
Interesting. Very interesting. So if we're talking about the past and we're talking about how we made decisions in the past, I assume from what you said, it can create disharmony in our relationships. Is that correct?
Oh, massive disharmony. Because, let's think about this. Let's think about a couple who they get married initially, right? And everything's great. And then over 5-10 years, suddenly the relationship falls apart. Why does that happen? And that's a really interesting question, because most times, Gail, when we have an issue with somebody else, we look outside of ourselves and we think the problem lies in them, or the problem lies in the situation. It's because we're not financially stable, for example. That's why we're fighting. It's because he doesn't put the lid on the toothpaste. That's why I'm mad, right? But none of this stuff is actually why we're actually angry at all. What it is that old pattern created when we were little continues to bring meaning or information to us that doesn't actually fit the situation we're in. And once we can own it like that, we can start to not blame ourselves, but at least put the responsibility in the right place. It's like, okay, I have a pattern that gets angry about the toothpaste. Right? That's very different. I have a pattern that is blaming. That's very different than it's his fault that he doesn't put the lid on the toothpaste. Now we get an opportunity to own the pattern. And that's step 2, is when we flip that switch and we stop thinking that the problem's out there and just start owning it. It's mine. And that's okay. Like I'm saying, not from a position of blame, because nobody chose to create a pattern which would be mad about toothpaste. But once we have it, we can just see it as our pattern.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So what are the new things that are happening with the brain, Adele? Are there things that we should be looking out for and paying attention to?
Yeah. So anytime we're triggered, that's a brain pattern. Anytime there's 2 ways to tell if you have a brain pattern that's stopping you from getting to a particular goal. Okay. One way is you set a goal and you're just not taking any action in the direction of that goal. So you're procrastinating, or you're avoiding, or like I was doing, quitting. Okay. That's an indication of a brain pattern. The second way to tell is when you feel yucky. Okay. So those negative emotions, which I don't like to use that term, but let's use it just for simplicity. So all of that guilt, shame, fear, anger, all of that stuff, confusion, it's all just a sign of a pattern. So why is this happening? What's actually going on? Well, when we understand patterns, we start to see those negative emotions differently. Here's how I suggest that people see negative emotions. Our brain is always trying to communicate with us, but the parts of our brain that are trying to get us to that goal, those subconscious messages, they don't speak English or any other language for that matter. They speak in terms of emotions. So when you set a goal and you're not taking action in that direction, okay, the subconscious will try to alert you that you're running the wrong pattern. And how it does that is it makes you feel like crap, right? How it does that is it triggers one of those negative emotions. And if we can just see that as the messenger, and what that message is telling us is knock, knock, it's time to upgrade this pattern. The pattern that you're currently using will not take you in that direction. Then bingo, now we are personally empowered, because now all of those negative emotions just become messengers. And as long as we stop shooting the messenger, positive thinking, guys, that's shooting the messenger, and instead say, okay, great, I got a pattern that's communicating with me. Wow, now we got an opportunity to actually do something to take us in the direction we want to go in.
So are you saying, because I so believe in mindset, and I believe most of what I go through in a day, I'm able to overcome because of how I think. Is mindset tied to the brain, or are you saying no?
You know what I like to say? When our patterns are aligned with the goal, then we naturally have positive mindset, empowered mindset. It's a result, and it's not a tool that we need to be using in order to get to the goal. Right now, it's the best tool we have simply because we haven't been taught how to work with brain patterns. But when you think about that internal guide, Gail, that's constantly knocking on the door saying, knock, knock, it's time to upgrade this pattern, and we know how to work with patterns, then taking action is actually effortless, easy, and is done with joy. Everything that we strive to get through a positive mindset is available for us because our brain is aligned. Yeah? Is that making sense?
So am I understanding you to say that they kind of go together?
Yeah. A positive mindset is an indication that the patterning that you're using, the brain pattern, is aligned with your goal. So why does mindset then work, right? That might be a good question that your listener is asking. Like, great, so I use all of these positive affirmations and eventually it works. It does seem to get me in the direction I want to go. And the reason for that is because saying those affirmations over and over again is a way to change that pattern. Eventually, the brain will change its patterning, and it will go, oh, okay, I'm going to rewire that particular negative, worried pattern that's worried about the future, and I'm going to change that to what the person is positively thinking. Okay? So that is one way. But I have found, and this is just me and working with my clients, that takes a long time. It takes a lot of affirmations sometimes to change a pattern, right? So working with the pattern first.
I have to tell you that I am a firm believer in mindset. And yes. I know people that hear me all the time, they say, oh, you keep saying this. But I go to bed happy, I get up happy, and I do what I love all day. And so that's a mindset. I mean, I've got a lot of stumbling blocks. I'm immune compromised right now. I've been inside the apartment for 1 year almost. I go to the doctors and I go to the hospital, but I'm never depressed because I love what I do. I'm happy. I live alone except for my cats, and I just, I'm a happy person. So I find that how I think and, what my mind says transforms into how I am all day.
Exactly. So, and that,
but I don't know what's going on in my brain.
right, right. But I mean, that's a good indication of a brain pattern that is working. So you are able to face your obstacles in life and face them with ease and with positivity, because you've got a brain pattern that faces those situations with ease and positivity. Yeah. Okay. And that comes from, and you tell me, Gail, but I'm guessing that comes from years of work. Am I right?
Well, I also think it's the way I was raised.
Okay.
One of the things that, I've been in several mastermind groups, and one of the things that people say is that when I'm telling them my story and, where I went from 13 years old to where I am now, so many years later, they'll say to me, well, you just never took no for an answer. And that's really true. I mean, yeah, did people say no to me? All the time. But I said, okay, what's another way I can get there? And I just circumvented that and went on to doing it a different way. So, and still to this day, I don't like to take no for an answer. So it's, but I think it was the way I was raised, it was having responsibility, doing what you say you would do, all of those things, and never taking life for granted. I just knowing that if I want to chart a path, it's up to me to do it. And if people come along that will help me, great. But if they don't, I'll just do it on my own. So, I mean, it's a pattern that I've kind of always had.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's what I was trying to say earlier, is that most of our patterns are created when we're very little. Like initially when we're first born, we're not born with patterns. We're not like animals that are born with instincts and they know what to do immediately. We have to learn it all. And so very quickly when we enter this world, we start piecing together brain patterns which will carry us through the rest of our life, right? And, yours, positivity and, yeah, I'm just going to keep going and do it. Fantastic. That works. And, like, lucky for you, you had an opportunity to create those patterns early on. If I can come from the opposite side, I did not. I had very worried, anxious patterns that came from my childhood. And I was constantly moving through life, panicking most of the time. I had 10 years of daily panic attacks. I had a very, very high level of anxiety all of my life. And so for me, thinking positive was really tricky, because it was almost as if I was making myself wrong every time I was trying to think positive in the face of this anxiety. So I found that working with my patterns instead allowed me to come to that positive mindset without having to approach it through, okay, let's correct something that is not working, right? So let's fix something that is broken. My anxiety. Right. Would have been perceived as broken, right? So instead I said, okay, I am anxious, and here's where I feel that anxiety, and here's my thoughts, or the three aspects of the pattern. And then I owned it. Okay, this is my pattern. This isn't actually given by the world out there. This is me and my reaction to the world out there. And so that allowed me to flip that switch. And then I just gently teased that pattern apart. I was able to surrender to what was going on, observe what was going on in my body, and very quickly that pulled that pattern apart. It took me 6 weeks initially to stop that panicking. But after I did this every day for 6 weeks, that panic attacks that I used to have, and that was daily, Gail, every single day I was having panic attacks, it just stopped. Overnight, it just went from I was somebody who would panic to I was somebody who didn't panic. And suddenly I was much more positive and much more able to face life head on, just like you do now, right? So I like to say to people, if mindset is absolutely key. I totally agree with you. And it's just, how are we going to achieve that mindset rather than let's not worry about mindset, because you need positive mindset. Let's be honest, right? But how do we get there? That's the question. What's the journey?
Well, then we only have like a minute left, Adele. So I want people to know, how can they get a copy of your book, Shift: 4 Steps to Personal Empowerment? Where can they find you? And what's the best way to reach you?
So they can get a copy of my book for free. All I ask is that they pay for shipping. And that is on Shift 4 Steps. So I'm going to spell it www.shift, the number 4 steps, steps.com. And there's a button there. They just have to click in that button, fill in the information. All I ask is that you pay for shipping and handling, and I will send you an autographed copy of my book. In that book is the 4 steps, and if anybody needs any additional help, they are always welcome to reach out to me.
How wonderful, because you're providing such a wonderful service. And the fact that you, Adele, can say, I made this shift in 5 weeks is fantastic. There's no bigger endorsement than that. So
yes.
My guest has been Adele Spraggon, and if you want to get her book, it's Shift 4steps.com, and it's a letter, it's a number 4. So, wow, great stuff, Adele. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Gail. It's been my pleasure. A lot of fun.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. I choose my guests carefully, so if you have someone you'd like me to interview, please drop me a line at gailcarson13@gmail.com. In the meantime, check out my intro program, Mindset Matters, at www.sobmindset.com. See you next week.